to the Done Deal Show. I'm joined live on the Football Terrace by Ben Jacob, who broke the Delap news yesterday before anybody else. And we've got loads to talk about today. Arsenal negotiating with RB Leipzig for Benjamin Sesko. What does that mean for the Gyokeres deal? Bruno Fernandes, is his exit getting near at Manchester United? We're talking about some new contracts. We're looking at Sancho. There's so much. I can't even list it all. Just in for the next 60 minutes. Ben's here to give us the latest on what's going on. But good morning, first of all, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. As you say, it's busy. There's actual done deals on the Done Deal Show. And that the 10th of June window is going to make things very interesting in the next 24 to 48 hours. So I'm going to be a busy man.
Yes, I mean, even with, we'll get into Liverpool a little bit later because lots to talk about, but it looks like they're actually getting a fee now for Trent because of the World Club Cup, which I think a lot of fans will find intriguing. But I wanted to start with the big news that broke last night. It's been everywhere this morning that Bruno Fernandes and his team have had conversations with Al-Hilal, and they're seriously considering a multi-100 million pound move to the Saudi League. Man United, the rumors range between 80 to 100 million in the potential transfer fee. What is the latest, as you understand it, with Bruno Fernandes and his potential exit from United?
Yeah, at the moment, Bruno Fernandes has to give Al-Hilal an answer, and Al-Hilal hold some optimism because Bruno still hasn't said no, and the talks are certainly advanced on all the different points of a potential deal. Bruno Fernandes has to first give his answer to Al-Hilal. Then, if it's a positive one, Manchester United will have a formal approach. And at the moment, what I can tell you is that Fernandes is giving serious consideration to joining Al-Hilal. This is not going to be a summer saga because Al-Hilal are very clear that Bruno Fernandes must decide before the Club World Cup and ideally in the next 48 hours now. And if it's not resolved, they'll move on to other targets. For example, Youri Tielemans is one option in the same position as Fernandes because Hilal want a number 8, ideally a right winger, and in number 9 as well. And there's some sort of politics going on at the moment as to whether they just move for Victor Osimhen or even try and do a sensational loan for Cristiano Ronaldo. But all of these stories are expected to resolve themselves by early June because Al-Hilal then head off to America. They play in the Club World Cup. Their opening game is against Real Madrid. They also need a manager, by the way, for that tournament too. So there's lots to get through for Al-Hilal's recruitment team with the support of central figures. And Bruno Fernandes is going to give his answer imminently. Manchester United are calm about the situation. Sources note they haven't had a bid yet. But if one comes, we're going to find out whether this not-for-sale stance is genuine. And Hilal are prepared to pay in and around 100 million euros, maybe even a little bit higher to get their man. And if Fernandes says yes, I actually think from speaking to sources, it's going to be very difficult for Manchester United to turn down a bid. The last thing I would add is that Fernandes' agent has held face-to-face talks this week in Saudi Arabia, which is telling because it shows you that he's taking this very seriously. And then we do hear some reports in Saudi that there's this number, 60 million. Bruno Fernandes can leave. There's a buyout clause. That's denied by Manchester United and, interestingly, Hilal sources as well. So I'm not aware that they can simply trigger something or get Bruno Fernandes for cheap. Manchester United will hold any cards should a bid be made. And right now, Hilal are just working to get that green light from Bruno Fernandes. And if it comes, a formal bid will follow very quickly. But if we get to June the 10th, the first mini deadline day with this exceptional window that's opened, allowing clubs in Saudi and in the Premier League and others to do deals. If we get to the end of that first window and Bruno Fernandes is not resolved, then that's it. He's been told categorically, you must decide early and in the next few days. And if Hilal fly to that tournament in America and Bruno Fernandes is still undecided, they will sign somebody else and the offer will be pulled. So this is not going to drag on for the duration of the summer.
For me, I actually think that's better for all parties, if I'm being honest. As a fan of Man United, I don't want this dragging on all summer. I don't want to get to the late July. We're on pre-season. Will Bruno be with us? United need money though, and as much as Bruno's been fantastic, and we are up against it in terms of replacing him, we've already seen Delap picking Chelsea over Manchester United. Money does talk in this game, as you well know, Ben. And for me, I look at what's available in the market. And my only view is this. If we sell him, if we get 80 million, 90 million, whatever the fee ends up being after it's converted into pounds, about the reaction. It's about who United go on to sign. Cunha is an excellent signing so far, but we need a number 9 that scores goals and will score goals straight away. I know that there's talks about Mbeumo now that we haven't got Delap. Of course, we're going to get onto Gyokeres a little bit later. Where do you think Man United would put, based on what you're hearing, where do you think Man United would spend this money were they to raise it? Because it will be pure profit because they don't owe any money on Bruno Fernandes. Where do you think it would be invested? Who are the likely targets United would go after?
At the moment, I think Bruno leaves and you definitely need another midfielder. But interestingly, Ruben Amorim has been asking for either an 8 plus Cunha at 10 or 2 10s. And this is where the interest in Brian and Mbeumo materializes from. And my understanding is that Manchester United and Newcastle are the two clubs really pushing at the moment for Brian and Mbeumo. Brentford haven't had a bid yet. He's got 1 year left on his contract, but there is a 1 year option and that can be triggered by the club. So it wouldn't surprise me if Brentford takes steps to extend Mbeumo over the summer in order to protect his value. It's going to cost about 50 million. And a lot of fans say that's pretty good value. It's lower than Cunha. But again, he's not got much time left on his contract. So it's still a relatively big outlay. And I think if Bruno Fernandes goes, and even actually if he stays, there may be a possibility of Manchester United going for Mbeumo along with Cunha. But of course, they've got to balance the books and make the finances work. So right now, if we remove Bruno from the equation, sources say United have basically got 100 million to spend. 62.5 million has gone on Cunha. Cunha's not done his medical yet. There's no issue with the deal. He has to get a visa first. When that visa comes, it might be today or certainly by early next week. He'll do his medical. And then Manchester United will likely list that contract start date as 1st of July. And that allows them to put the first payment, 3 installments, the first is paid up front, into the next financial year, as opposed to on the books for this year. And that will just help Manchester United get a bit more PSR wiggle room. Then the other 30-odd million was earmarked for Delap. As I broke 2 days ago, he's going to Chelsea. That medical is now scheduled. So Manchester United have to find a way now to get in the right kind of number 9 and also some kind of value. And we hear a lot of reports that Ruben Amorim wants Victor Gyokeres, and that may be true in theory, but that's a 70 million euros deal. And Manchester United will need some outgoings in order to pull that kind of business off. But of course, number 9, huge priority. And was Bruno to leave, and they get 100 million euros or more, then suddenly the club can afford to invest in a Victor Gyokeres, maybe even add a Brian Mbeumo as well. So the consideration, if Bruno comes to Manchester United and says, I want to go, if Manchester United are respectful of that and get the kind of figure that they think is worthwhile, they can rebuild. And that money will go a long way. Add to that the expected departure of Alejandro Garnacho, with Napoli potentially, because they might do De Bruyne and Garnacho, because De Bruyne is your more central playmaker. Garnacho goes on the wing where he prefers, even though Ruben Amorim has used him more centrally. That's a possibility. Georgi Sudakov is another name at Shakhtar that Napoli are looking at. And Chelsea have Garnacho on their list as well, along with Nico Williams and Jamie Gittins. So if Garnacho leaves, pure profit. Bruno Fernandes reflects well on the books. Suddenly you're looking at Manchester United being able to do a revamp. And then to come back to your original question, number 9, as I referenced, another number 10 or an 8 that can basically play in an advanced position. Then I think you're still looking at a right-sided winger in the form of a younger, homegrown talent. Tyler Dibbling is one of the names that is under consideration. Southampton have said publicly he's a 100 million player, but I'm actually told that bids over 40 million will stand a chance, and Spurs are ones to watch there. another defender could come in. And then goalkeeper's obviously interesting because 6 months ago, I'd have told you Bayern's leaving and United are only looking for a number 2. Now we have to understand what will happen with Onana, who has some interest from Saudi Arabia, although contrary to reports, the club is not Neom FC. Nothing has advanced close or done with Onana and Neom, but there's broader Saudi interest. And if United let Onana go, then as a high priority, they need to find a number 1 goalkeeper. And that's where, along with Atletico Madrid, I would keep a very close eye on Martinez.
Potentially to Manchester United, you say?
Yeah, Martinez, Manchester United and Atletico Madrid. Obviously with Atleti, it depends on whether Jan Oblak leaves. It's quite interesting that Oblak's only 32, the same age as Martinez. But if he's moved on, Atleti have got 2 names they really like. Joan Garcia, who wants to become a number 1, which is why it's going to be intriguing to see whether Arsenal, who are pushing quite hard, can pull that off. And even Villa, because there's an outside chance that Martinez leaves and Villa go to Garcia and say you're a number 1, and Arsenal go to Garcia and say you're a number 2 because David Raya is expected to stay. And then I think Garcia would give preference to a club like Villa because he'd get more game time. But keep an eye on Manchester United with Martinez. And they have looked also at Garcia themselves, but more 6 months ago as a backup to Onana. Now we're going to have to wait and see what happens with this merry-go-round of goalkeepers because Manchester United's perspective may change. Onana could become dispensable at the right price. And then you go from replacing Bayern to having to find a new number 1. And once again, Manchester United have to think collectively, not individually, with their budget. The amount of times I get told, Terry, this target's great value. Why don't they just pay what it takes? But they've got 4 or 5 positions to strengthen in. And once Cunha's through the door, at the moment anyway, I know Rashford, Anthony, Garnacho could all change the finances. But right now, Man United have basically got 30 million quid to spend and about 3 priority positions to strengthen him for Ruben Amorim, which is why we might have to be a bit patient with United's window because it might not get going until after the financial deadline passes.
Absolutely, but at the same time, that's why the Bruno deal intrigues me, because if that's to happen before the World Club Cup, I know that they may not complete the transactions until the 1st of July because it goes over, but that's £80 million in. And I think that's what United fans have got to look at. If we have the options where we think, right, we can bring in the right central midfielders and the right 10s to replace the creativity and the goals from Bruno, you take the 80 million and you go and sign those players, or you take that 80 million and say, let's get a deal done for Gyokeres now because we have the cash for it. The club has to consider that because I love Bruno. He's been a fantastic servant to this football club, but we do have monetary issues. Part of me doesn't want to see Bruno leave, but there's another side of me that says, if by the end of this window with Bruno going, Garnacho going, Rashford leaving, if we could end up with Mbeumo, if we could end up with Edison in the middle, if we could end up with a Gyokeres up front, we could end up with like Martinez in goal. Yes, Bruno's leaving's a massive pain, but overall, you could argue the team looks better. And Man United fans, I think, should be more focused on what is the team going to look like rather than I love Bruno Fernandes, the individual.
Yeah, and he's 30 as well. And I know that's not old. And you're absolutely right to say that Fernandes is irreplaceable. He's got this incredible flair and leadership, but you have to trade that against your revamp. And I suppose 2 years ago, Liverpool had this when Al-Hilal were bidding 150 million for Salah. And it was essentially a choice between, do you keep your older player and back him to keep performing? And Liverpool were right because Salah, even up to the end of this season, 2 years on, has been sensational. But there's plenty of other instances where you take the value now because it may not be there again in a year's time. You use that money to invest. And now Manchester United haven't got Champions League football or any European football. They may need that fee. And I expect Al-Hilal to play upon that and try and strike a deal if they get a yes from Bruno Fernandes. And that could come at any point now because the deadline for Bruno Fernandes with a final offer from Al-Hilal was supposed to be yesterday evening. As I exclusively reported, it was a 72-hour deadline, which is why Fernandez's agent went to Saudi Arabia. So Al-Hilal may already have their answer, or if they haven't,
Yes.
it's just because of time differences, because Bruno's on tour with Man United, the agents in Saudi Arabia, Manchester United officials are still in London. So we're going to have to be a little bit patient, but I think we'll have an answer on Bruno Fernandes today, tomorrow, or by early next week. It's going to move really quickly one way or the other. And then, as you rightly say, Manchester United need to think about how they can back Ruben Amorim, because a key point in all of this is Ruben Amorim did not want to take the Manchester United job mid-season for the exact reasons that we've now seen, because he was inheriting Ten Hag recruitment. He was coming in without a transfer window, and the change to his system and the intensity with which he plays requires pace, physicality, and wide players, whether they're deeper or whether they're wingers, that can hug the touchline and then when required still have offensive output. And a lot of this Manchester United squad, even if individually strong profiles, collectively they don't have the right chemistry and attributes that Amorim is looking for. And this is why this summer, the first under Amorim, is going to be really important. It's why Amorim's not going to walk away. It's why Manchester United is still backing Amorim, because they know that this is kind of the day one right now that Amorim wanted. Obviously, the season can't be excused. And obviously, Amorim has been a part of the lowest ever Premier League finish. But in Amorim's mind, this is the day one he wanted. And this is why when he was negotiating, he did his best to say, no, let me wait. Let me win the title with Sporting and let me join in summer 2025. Manchester United were fearful at that point that Pep Guardiola might leave and that Amorim might be courted by Man City. So they said, take it or leave it now. Otherwise, we're going elsewhere. We don't want Ten Hag to see out the season. Amorim said it was too good an opportunity and club to turn down, but he joined against his better judgment in terms of when the start date was.
Yes.
So now I think we're going to see the true Amorim this summer, and it's probably better to judge Amorim's system and who Manchester United recruit for him at the end of the window, rather than looking backwards at what can't be changed. Because a lot of this season, I think, was out of Amorim's control.
Listen, a lot of United fans agree. That there are some that don't. There's some that think he is the problem, but he's staying. At the end of the day, we can debate that till the cows come home. He's staying. He needs the players to make the system that he's instilling at Manchester United work. It's as simple as that for me and a lot of other Manchester United fans out there. Viewers, give us your views, give us your opinions. Make sure you're hitting the like button as well for us if you haven't done so already. We have a poll running, actually. 57% of our audience are saying right now that Man United should sell. 25% are saying only for 80 million plus. So you're looking at well over 80% of the Football Terrace community think that Man United should be taking that money. But moving on from Man United, and we will get onto Gyokeres a little bit later in the show, but I wanted to touch on Trent Alexander-Arnold because Liverpool are now getting money for him.
Yeah, they are. So when you think about how little is left on Alexander-Arnold's contract, or was now, because he's a Real Madrid player as of June the 1st. But up until when Liverpool lifted the Premier League trophy, the expectation from Liverpool was that Alexander-Arnold would either see out his contract and thus miss at least half of the Club World Cup, or if Real wanted him, they would have to pay not just nominal compensation, but a transfer fee. And that's exactly what's happened. So Liverpool are to receive 10 million euros for the final 30 days of Trent Alexander-Arnold's contract. And it shouldn't be seen as just a buyout. It's a transfer fee. He's been signed for money. So he's not leaving Liverpool on a free with a little bit of compensation to get him early. He's leaving Liverpool for 10 million euros. And this is a deal that has been driven by Richard Hughes, who was part of the modelling to understand what Alexander-Arnold was valued at for the final 30 days. And Liverpool factored in the fact that Real had desire. They want him at the Club World Cup. And also, Real are earning a lot of money by being at the Club World Cup, both in terms of prize money, but also other things, because joining a tournament like that as Real Madrid, you get a lot of hype, you get a lot of sponsors, you get a lot of interest. Being able to unveil Trent and make his debut likely against Al-Hilal on June the 18th, that has value for Real Madrid. So Richard Hughes took a data-driven approach and formulated this number of 10 million euros, which Real quickly agreed to. Michael Edwards then led the negotiations, and there was actually a breakthrough, believe it or not, on Sunday night, about 2 hours after Liverpool had officially lifted the Premier League trophy. And then from there, it's all been finalised. Real have announced that Trent Alexander-Arnold has signed a 6-year deal, 10 million euros to Liverpool, but they actually see the money as 10 million pounds. And the reason for that little bit extra is because in addition to the 10 million euros fee, Liverpool are also saving 30 days of Trent Alexander-Arnold wages. So when you add the wage savings to the transfer fee, it's basically 10 million to Liverpool, which is astonishing. And then in January, I can reveal Real Madrid tried to buy Trent Alexander-Arnold, and they made 2 approaches. The first, a verbal one for 20 million euros. The second, a verbal bid for 25 million euros. And Richard Hughes turned it down because they felt that regardless of the money and the fear at that point of losing Trent on a free, it was better to use Trent to get over the line to win a 20th top flight title and a second in the Premier League. And now Liverpool are naturally delighted because it suits all parties. Trent gets his new challenge, Real Madrid get their man for the Club World Cup, and Liverpool get 10 million for 30 days, releasing Trent Alexander-Arnold, and they can put that towards their summer rebuild. And then, by the way, Jeremy Frimpong is done and is likely to be announced also later today.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic start, as you mentioned, for Liverpool, and getting that 10 million in for 30 days. I know it isn't quite the 70 or 80 million pounds that Liverpool fans were wanting if you'd have signed the new deal, but it's something, and it shows how much Real Madrid want him. They want to go and win this tournament. A lot of teams wanting to bring in those new players, and with Frimpong happening, Wirtz is how close is Wirtz now to being done and dusted and over the line?
Yeah, Liverpool are confident on Wirtz. It's sort of a race between Gyokeres and Wirtz to see which becomes the next bit of business for Liverpool. Gyokeres is a bit simpler because there's a price of over 40 million pounds. And if Liverpool meet that, maybe it even goes as high as 45, then Gyokeres has already agreed terms. So as I revealed 2 months ago, Liverpool are leading the race for Gyokeres. Gyokeres wants to join Liverpool, and the expectation now is that deal gets done. It's really just about the club-to-club talks. Whereas with Wirtz, everybody got excited, and I suppose rightly so from a Liverpool point of view, because Wirtz had informed both Man City and Bayern that his preference was to go to Anfield. Despite that, Liverpool have been cautious because they still sense there is a possibility, even if it's not the most likely scenario, that Wirtz just stays at Leverkusen, does an extra year, and then moves in summer 2026. And I think the reason why Liverpool are cautious is partly because that's the nature of how they do business. It was the same for Zubimendi. A lot of people were celebrating Zubimendi to Liverpool, and Liverpool were saying, hang on a minute, the player's very sensitive, the player's very in love with the club. Let's just not say it's done until we get a signature. And they were right, because Zubimendi woke up, changed his mind, and now is going to Arsenal instead. So with Wirtz, it still requires that club-to-club negotiation. It will definitely be a club record for Liverpool if they get it over the line. Talks are advanced. Liverpool feel it's heading in a very positive direction. So there is a very realistic chance that this now gets resolved in the 1st to the 10th of June window, and Wirtz becomes a Liverpool player. But there is just that part of nagging doubt within the Liverpool hierarchy that says Leverkusen are not just going to bend over here. Leverkusen are going to want an important fee. It's not like Frimpong. There's no release clause. So right now, all I can tell you on Wirtz is that there is no club-to-club agreement as of Friday morning. There are further talks this afternoon. They're moving in a positive direction. I would expect, come the end of the window, Wirtz to be a Liverpool player. I would expect Gyokeres to be a Liverpool player, and Frimpong is done. And then I still think Liverpool will spend important money on a number 9 as well. So this is going to be a really big and important summer for Liverpool backing Arne Slot. But with Wirtz, let's just be patient, because Leverkusen have a great relationship with Liverpool. But when you're negotiating a deal in excess of 100 million euros, it may just take a bit more time.
Absolutely, as you say, and there's so many, as you say, I's to dot, T's to cross in a deal like that. Viewers, give us your thoughts, give us your opinions in the comments section below. A few jokes in the super chats there. Alejandro Garnacho said yes to Real Madrid. The only issue is Madrid didn't ask him anything. Jason here says, fantastic work by Hughes and Edwards, 10 million for 30 days, and United gets paid 8 million to drag a tired, unhappy squad to play off the season, tourney and losing. Yeah, but we might get 80 million pounds for a player that you Liverpool fans said was washed. So I'm going to defend my club there a little bit, my old mate. I'm going to get onto the strikers that Liverpool might go to later, because I want to kind of do that when we get to Arsenal, because I think there's such overlap in the striker conversation. With Chelsea, obviously a massive week. They qualified for the Champions League. They win the Conference League. And I want to make sure the viewers know this. Ben, who's on the show, has now dropped one of his Jacobs crackers yesterday and broke the news before anybody else that Delap was choosing Chelsea. They are in talks, of course, and it's been fairly well documented that they're going to be looking for another striker. I suppose Chelsea fans would like to know, with Delap coming in, will it be a similar profile, a different type of player, an older individual? Delap's done. What's next for Chelsea in the transfer window, Ben?
By the way, I love the fact now when I break anything, I'm getting a Jacobs cracker, a Ben banger. And I know that they're viewers of this show because we've only ever mentioned it in one place. And therefore, anyone commenting on X or elsewhere, I know that you've obviously seen this show, which is great. And we've had a few, haven't we? The Cunha one was my exclusive, both the agreement of a 5-year contract and the original interest, the Man United and Mbeunmo one, the Delap one. So, and I say this very warmly to the chat because I always appreciate the honesty and the engagement. But when Lyle says ban Jacobs is like a 5th-tier journo, fine, you're entitled to that opinion, but at least spell my name right. B-E-N, not B-A-N, and Jacobs with an S, not an apostrophe S. So maybe ban Jacobs is a 5th-tier journalist, but Ben Jacobs at least is up to 4th tier after my recent Delap exclusives. That's all I'm going to say.
You've had that promotion. You've had that promotion to at least 4th tier.
But to be honest, I like it because the whole point of this is we have to have some fun with it and everyone's entitled to their opinions. So I appreciate all of the comments and the engagement. I'll always do my best to answer your questions and engage with you. So with Chelsea, look, Delap is the one they wanted. He was the number one choice. And as I revealed 2 days ago, Chelsea agreed terms and now have triggered the 30 million release clause. And this was kind of a waiting game because Delap went on a little bit of a merry-go-round tour. He met with Man United, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Everton. And the two front runners were seen as Chelsea and Manchester United. Manchester United felt in a strong position if they won the Europa League final because they believed that Delap felt not only he wanted to move back to the Northwest, but also at that football club. Now, without European football, Chelsea were able to move ahead. Manchester United had one secret weapon in Jason Wilcox, who knows Delap very well. Chelsea had two in Joe Shields and Enzo Maresca. But at the end of the day, European football is very important to Delap. And a lot of Manchester United fans say to me, why would Cunha agree to a long-term project and just throw himself straight into the football club and do so before the Europa League final? And someone so young like Delap would insist on European football. And the answer is simple. Next season is really important to Delap to play European football because Thomas Tuchel has said, if you're playing regular European or in Chelsea's case now Champions League football, you stand the strongest possible chance of making the 2026 World Cup squad. So Delap is thinking quite short term because he doesn't want to miss out on the World Cup next summer. In addition to that, we now have an interesting dynamic where Chelsea have a Club World Cup, but Delap wants to go and play at the under-21 Euros, again, to boost his England chances. And we'll have to kind of wait and see how that one pans out. But I think the Delap side would rather go to the under-21 Euros and then join up later with Chelsea for the second half of the Club World Cup. But Chelsea, of course, own the player once it's formalised. So it will be their decision. And the under-21 Euros does not fall in an international break, which means Chelsea would have, in theory, the power to prevent Delap from going to the under-21 Euros. So that one is done. Then, as you allude to, we're hearing a lot of reports about Chelsea speaking to other strikers. There is a possibility that Chelsea bring in another striker, but I don't feel they're in that much urgency to do so because they still rate Nicholas Jackson. So we're going to have to understand whether or not another name is likely. And if so, that definitely puts a question mark over the future of Nicholas Jackson. But Enzo Maresca has spoken very positively about Jackson and his influence. So I think the jury's still out on whether Chelsea definitively add a second striker. We know they like Victor Gyokeres, Hugo Ekitike, who's also a Liverpool target. They've looked at Benjamin Sesko. It looks like Arsenal are the ones advancing there. So let's see whether Chelsea put budget on another striker. But after Delap, the top priority next for Chelsea is to find a right-footed left winger. And that will be what I expect them to work on between now and when the Club World Cup starts.
And who are the targets they're looking at? I mean, we'll get back to striker in a minute. Who are the targets that you see Chelsea moving towards on that left-hand side? Because we've heard Rodrigo's name in recent days from some sources. Who are the players you think they're likely to target and talk to, Ben?
Rodrigo is kind of more of a market opportunity, as I revealed a month ago, a name being looked at by 2 or 3 Premier League clubs. Chelsea have not advanced anything with Rodrigo, but involved in this potential exit from Real Madrid is Ali Barrett, who has a very close relationship with Chelsea. And therefore, should Rodrigo become genuinely available, Chelsea will feel well positioned. But at this stage, they're not moving for Rodrigo. I think Arsenal are probably the most concrete interest from the Premier League, but there's been no bids yet. But my understanding with Rodrigo is that Real Madrid will sanction an exit for 90 million euros. And the advantage of Rodrigo is that those clubs looking for a left-sided player also get a winger very capable of playing on the right-hand side, because that's where he's been forced to play for Real Madrid, because obviously at Madrid on the left side is Vinny Jr. and Mbappe. And therefore, signing Rodrigo for Arsenal gives you a left-sided player. But if Saka gets injured, you've got cover on the right side along with Ranieri. From Chelsea's point of view, if Jadon Sancho, that we can maybe talk about in a minute, was to be returned to Manchester United, and if Mykhailo Mudryk ends up being permanently banned, you bring in a left-sided player. But if you want to move him over to the right-hand side, you have that option. It's the same really with Pedro Neto. He can play on the right or the left and lead the line for Chelsea. So the versatility and the talent of Rodrigo is not going unnoticed because he's a market opportunity, but no bid yet. And there's certainly nothing advanced or bubbling yet between Chelsea and Rodrigo, other than internal knowledge that this is a player that might become available in the coming weeks. More concrete targets for Chelsea on the left. Jamie Gittins, the cheapest, and Chelsea really like the player. Alejandro Garnacho, who Chelsea explored in January, along with Napoli. Manchester United still insists that they want 60 million quid or more for Garnacho, but I'm told there will be some flexibility there. So Garnacho might become a market opportunity because the value kind of goes down, doesn't it? The same with Rashford, as soon as the club are basically driving him out of the club. And then Nico Williams is the most exciting profile for many clubs, particularly Chelsea and Arsenal. But despite the fact the release clause is definitely market value, the agent fees and the wages make that a very expensive deal. So we're going to have to understand whether any club feels Williams is worth the overall outlay. The wage would be at least £250,000 a week plus bonuses. And the other thing with Nico Williams is that, a bit like Zubimendi, he's in love with Athletic Bilbao. So this isn't just about triggering a 58 million euros release clause. This is also about, can you persuade Williams to finally leave Athletic Bilbao? And there's a very strong chance, even if somebody triggered the clause, that Williams, who is well paid at Athletic Bilbao, decides to stay for another season. So you've got Chelsea and Arsenal there. And in addition to that, Barcelona, in theory, dream of Nico Williams to reunite him with his international teammate Lamine Yamal. But it's difficult to see how they'll be able to afford that deal.
Yeah, some interesting times. And I want to pick up on one thing you said just so I can get clarity and our viewers. So when you said about Delap being the number one choice, a lot of Chelsea fans have been on our shows in the comment sections are saying that he's kind of the young option. Chelsea are looking for a bigger and better player for him to maybe play backup to. Is that not your understanding? Your understanding is Delap is going to be most likely to be the centrepiece of Chelsea's attack next season.
Yeah, I think it's not lost on Chelsea, though, that Nicholas Jackson got sent off against Newcastle. They finished the season in the Premier League without a defined number 9. And on deadline day in January, both Jackson and Mark Gahey got injuries against West Ham, and they played much of the second half of the season without a defined striker. So it'd be logical for Chelsea to think they might want to overstock in that position, especially because Mark Gahey could go on loan to Ipswich Town. There's concrete interest there. It's separate to the Delap deal, but there's a realistic possibility that he goes. So then with Delap, even if Jackson stays, Chelsea may feel one other forward would be very welcome. But where you have a challenge is if you've pitched to Delap, you're going to get minutes and boost your England chances. If you're pitching to Jackson, you're going to stay and you're going to get minutes. Then were they to enter the conversation in a formal sense for Hugo Ekitike or Victor Gyokeres, it's obvious that kind of name would expect to be the lead striker as well. So it's a balancing act. And at this stage, we'll have to wait and see what Chelsea do, because Enzo Maresca's system will only lean towards one lead striker. And as a consequence, they are going to have to be careful not to overstock and give Enzo Maresca too many headaches. We're hearing reports in Germany that Chelsea are still proceeding with Hugo Ekitike. That's not quite my understanding. Ekitike is a target for sure. But now that Delap's arrived, I think Chelsea might just put the brakes on for a day or two and work out exactly what they think they need. And then if it transpires an Ekitike or a Gyokeres or a Sesko is bid for, that may be a clue that Nicholas Jackson does become available on the market. Because although it's only my personal opinion, I think logically, if you look at the profiles, Jackson, Delap, and one of the other names, that's 3 established strikers that will all want to play week in, week out. Only one of them can start. One of them may be prepared to be a bit more bit part, but I think having 2 of them on the bench would be a little bit too much to handle. And Delap is value, but adding a Ekitike at 100 million or a Gyokeres at 70 million, big outlays unless they're going to play every week.
Well, this is exactly it. And I'm not trying to burst any Chelsea fans' bubble. You may end up with 2. I'm just trying to, as a fan, we're trying to understand, as a fan of football, trying to understand if Delap's gone there because he's going to be the main man, and then you drop 70 million on Ekitike, 70, 80 million on Gyokeres, pay them the salary thereafter. They, with a 1 striker system, and you're not in the Conference League this year, you both can't be the main man. And I think that's the interesting sort of dichotomy in this conversation.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. And obviously, this is what Chelsea are thinking at the moment. Do we need one more? Is Delap just a market opportunity because of an incredibly low 30 million release clause? Enzo Maresca knows him well. You've still saved a little bit of budget to move forwards with another name. I'm not ruling that out at this stage, but I think Chelsea wanted Delap. And of all the names, they wanted to get that one over the line. They've done that, so they can now relax a little bit. And my understanding is there's a lot of games going on in Germany at the moment, because remember, with Ekitike, Frankfurt want 100 million euros. So we're hearing constantly Chelsea are pushing, when actually I think Liverpool are there. And it's very easy for Frankfurt to try and pit Chelsea against Liverpool to get maximum valuation. And it may be true that they both end up entering that race, but it's certainly in the interest of Frankfurt to fuel a bidding war. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. And we may hear a lot about Chelsea and Ekitike, and I'm certainly not entirely pouring cold water over it. Yes. But I think Liverpool will be there for Ekitike as well. I think Arsenal will pick between Sesko and Gyokeres, and it seems like they're currently advancing on Sesko. So where's Gyokeres going to go? Because the feeling has always been Premier League is his most likely destination. You've got Juventus, you've got PSG. There's even some Saudi interest in him as well. But we're basically seeing the domino effect. And I think I said on the show 2 weeks ago that once the first striker went, everything else will become clearer. So Delap goes to Chelsea. Man U need a new target. Can they find a way to bid for Gyokeres? We'll have to wait and see. If Arsenal bid for Sesko, it means Gyokeres is not going there. So maybe Manchester United feel a bit more encouraged, but they've still got to find the money. Newcastle think they're going to keep hold of Alexander Isak, Callum Wilson. They may extend for another year, but are they going to try and sign a young striker as well? So we're starting to see things fall into place. But remember to look at these races outside of only the Premier League, because Juventus want a striker, PSG want a striker, Milan want a striker, even though they've not got any Champions League football. Saudi want several strikers. Al-Hilal are going to sign a forward. Al-Ittihad are going to sign a forward. Neom and Katsia are both going to sign forwards. So I think now we're just starting to see the dominoes fall into place. But right now, because Delap is expected to be done, Chelsea's number one priority is not to go and quickly add another striker, even though, of course, the window's open and they could. It's to bring in that left winger.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of that makes sense, that the domino effect, as you mentioned. Moving on to Arsenal, we are going to speak about a deal that's very close in relation to Gabriel's new contract. But of course, it's been very well publicized in the last 12 hours that there's been a lot of rumors about Gyokeres, a lot in Portugal about personal terms being no problem, bids being made, the deal being close. But one thing we spoke about a lot on the terrace in that time was nothing yet from the UK. Quite a bit from South America, quite a lot from Portugal, but nothing from the UK in relation to that. But yesterday, concrete talks with Benjamin Sesko, and according to Plattenberg, they're kind of getting into more of the nitty-gritty around that deal at the moment. Is it fair to say that Sesko is the most likely number 9 target now for Arsenal to land?
Yes, because they've done all the legwork on it, and Sesko wants Arsenal. It really is as simple as that. And sometimes players don't get the end destination. You may remember Mykhailo Mudryk flirted with Arsenal for months and months and months and then went to Chelsea. So it's not as simple as where the player wants to go, he ends up. But if Arsenal agree a deal with Leipzig, regardless of whether other clubs enter the race, I would expect Sesko to say yes to the Arsenal project, because as I said 12 months ago, Sesko made 2 determinations. First, he received pitches from Arsenal, Man United and Chelsea, and he picked Arsenal. Second, did he want to move to Arsenal last summer, or was it better for his pathway to do an extra season at Leipzig? And he decided the latter. So Sesko's been sold on Arsenal for a year. As I revealed in January, Arsenal made an approach to Leipzig to understand if anything was possible mid-season. It wasn't. And now, come summer, so much has been done with Sesko that it's really just about, can they find a way of doing the most economical deal possible with Leipzig? Because if you got that player buy-in, you're in a very strong position. And because Arsenal walked away and respected Leipzig, they've got an excellent club-to-club relationship as well, which I think is very important. Because when you go back and maybe say, we want to do something around the release clause rather than at the release clause, you might actually have that little bit of flexibility. So right now, my understanding, I know we hear reports that it's costing upwards of 90 million English pounds for Sesko. My information is the variable release clause is set more at 80 million euros. And it's up to Arsenal and Leipzig to determine whether it's release clause or nothing. I don't think that will be the case, or whether there is some flexibility around that 80 million euros number. And luckily for Arsenal, Berta has a long-standing relationship with the Red Bull Group, and he will now lead on negotiations. So it does look like Arsenal are advancing on Sesko. It doesn't mean they're not doing the same with Victor Gyokeres, because rarely do you put your eggs all in one basket. Yeah. But it would be absolutely no surprise, because of Arsenal's long-standing interest, if Arsenal ended up signing Sesko. And if they bid, because he becomes their target, as I said before, I would term Arsenal not just favourites, but strong, strong favourites, because Sesko has been sold on the Arsenal project for over a year.
Makes a lot of sense. We have a super chat here that's in relation to this that says, hi, Ben. Any truth about Mikel Arteta and Berta being loggerheads? I'm asking because what I understand by reliable journalists is that Sesko is the first choice. It's because it's a collective decision. So there is a lot of debate, and we put a poll out last night just to see what people were thinking. And there are a lot of people that think Arsenal should be getting Gyokeres, he's the better striker, and that Arteta is essentially controlling these situations, and Berta is being sort of pushed aside, and Arteta's got all this power that he maybe shouldn't have. Is your understanding that this is more about Arteta getting what he wants, or is the signing of Sesko also backed by Berta? He rates him and sees him as an important part of their team and structure.
I mean, my understanding is exactly the opposite. Berta's not being pushed aside by anyone. Anyone that knows Berta will know he is pretty aggressive in a good way behind closed doors. He's no nonsense. And Berta's job description says win now. When Arteta came in, it was about building a project. And Arteta and Edu were very much aligned, as were Arteta and Jason A2. But Berta's been brought in to shake things up. He's got full autonomy and control. If Berta wants to sign Victor Gyokeres, then it's Mikel Arteta that will be pushed back, not the other way around. And the move for Berta is in many ways about taking a little bit of autonomy away from any manager and building a model that is collaborative. And in collaborative models, you want that loggerhead dynamic. So I think fans wrongly assume that disagreement means conflict. And actually, freedom to challenge and debate and argument is exactly what creates an effective model. Otherwise, if they all just agree, then there's no scrutiny on anything and you don't get the best possible targets. So if Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta were not in a room arguing until they were blue in the face, but in a respectful and constructive way about these targets, then they wouldn't be doing their job. But
Agreed.
Berta is there to take the final decision. So if everyone at Arsenal wants Sesko and Berta listens to them and says, no, I'm going for Gyokeres, then he will have that autonomy, not the other way around. Mikel Arteta doesn't have a veto or any kind of control in a singular sense over transfers. It's collaborative. It feeds up to Berta. Berta will go to the ownership. Budget obviously will be factored in, but that's not an issue for Arsenal this window. They'll make their final decision. So I think it's being wrongly billed at the moment as Arteta wants Sesko, Berta wants Gyokeres. If they get Sesko, Arteta wins, and it shows that Berta's got no authority or control. Absolutely the opposite. Berta is the kind of character that will stick to his position and guns. So if they end up getting Sesko, it's because Berta has been persuaded that all this legwork and all this history around Sesko is right for Arsenal. If he says no, let's abandon ship, and Gyokeres is better, then again, he will have the power and the control and the autonomy to do this. So my understanding is he is the final decision maker. And actually that debate or argument, as it's sometimes billed, is extremely healthy. If you don't have it, you simply don't have a functional recruitment model.
I totally agree with the need for that. D King here says, why can't we even get two strikers like Liverpool's bench in 24-25? Look, I think you can, but I think all of these teams can buy two strikers. But where you have to be mindful is if you just think about the players that are on the tips of everybody's tongues, Gyokeres, Ekitike, Isaks, Sheshkos, Delap as well. These guys all see themselves as the main number 9. You could have two strikers, but you've got to create a situation like at Newcastle, where Callum Wilson is happy to be the understudy to Isak to a certain degree. It's very difficult for any of these big clubs, including Man City, Real Madrid, if they're using one striker, to go and get a Gyokeres and an Ekitike, and then to say to Ekitike, you're going to be on the bench and you've got to wait for your chance. A lot of players won't go for that because they see themselves as a starting player. So it's not as simple as just buy two strikers, any two strikers. You have to get that balance right as well, you know?
Yeah, and we had this conversation with Chelsea, if you want to listen back. And I think that context is key because sometimes fans, even journalists, we're a little bit superficial in the sense we look at who's available and what the fee is. And if collective business would benefit a team. And then when you add up all that info, you say, absolutely, just bite the bullet on two strikers or bring in these two players in different positions. But the player's always going to be looking at who they're competing with for spots. And if there's more than one person in that spot and they want to play regularly, they're going to be reticent. And if you take the prices away or the stats away and you just look at the profiles and their potential and how long they might stay at a club if they're a young player, and you say, because Chelsea is the best example, I know we're talking Arsenal, but let's just give the Chelsea example. If you say Nicholas Jackson, still relatively young, has got into double figures in Premier League seasons. If you say Delap, double figures for Ipswich, high ceiling. If you say Ekitike, incredible numbers for Frankfurt, line all three up. And I don't think you can tell who Enzo Maresca would start. So then if you're the second name in alongside Jackson, you back yourself because the pitch is probably, we need a number 9. If you're the third name in, Jackson stays and Delap arrives and you're Ekitike, just for the sake of the argument, you're immediately thinking, even if the fee suggests I'm the starter, even if they're telling me I'm going to be the lead guy, there's always a chance that a week into the season, Maresca goes, Delap's trained brilliantly, or Jackson knows this system better than anyone else. They come into the side, and when you're a goal scorer, if you score goals, you're likely to stay in the side. And that's what's kind of interesting, because if you're a fullback, we've seen it with Liverpool, a player might be dropped like Andy Robertson, but he'll soon come back into the side. Trent might be dropped for Connor Bradley. I know he's leaving now, but earlier in the season, he comes back in the side. So you think, okay. But if you're the world's best striker and you get benched for a game and another of the strikers I've mentioned scores a hat-trick, the likelihood is they're going to start the next game. And if they keep scoring and scoring and scoring, you feel, uh-oh, I'm too far down the pecking order. So most of these top players will want that guarantee they're the number 1. And that will be a challenge for Chelsea. If Jackson stays, who Maresca likes, and Delap comes in, anyone they pitch to now of the bigger names is going to be asking that question. Am I going to be starting every week? And Chelsea are going to be asking that question internally as well. And that's why I think it's a little bit premature to be assuming right now that Chelsea are definitively going to go off and add another big money striker.
That makes a great deal of sense here. I know we're running out a bit of time, so I want to try and get through these super chats. First one here from the Alam Matthews says, Ben Gyokeres is definitely off this season, as in leaving Sporting. With Delap going Chelsea, Sesko to Arsenal, is there now a real possibility he could end up at United?
Yeah, there is. And again, that's where the Bruno Fernandes money comes in. So I won't go into detail other than to say the Saudi perspective is they're getting quite optimistic on Bruno Fernandes. Let's wait and see if that optimism is reflected if they ever get into club-to-club talks with Manchester United in the coming days. But if Bruno went, I think Manchester United would move for Victor Gyokeres, and that's probably the domino. Bruno Fernandes goes to Al-Hilal, certainly not definite at this stage, but an option. Sesko to Arsenal, Gyokeres to Manchester United, Delap to Chelsea, and maybe Ekitike to Liverpool. And we have to sort of wait and see whether the dominoes fall in a different direction. But that's one example of how things could play out. So Manchester United like Gyokeres. I don't think Osimhen is really on their radar. I still think Osimhen will go to Juventus, Saudi Arabia, or possibly PSG. I think Gyokeres might go to PSG or Manchester United. But they've got to be able to afford, first of all, the fee and the wage for Gyokeres. And they might only be able to do that with a sale of Bruno Fernandes and Alejandro Garnacho rather than only one of them. So it's a little bit early to predict how Manchester United are going to react to missing out on Liam Delap. But absolutely, if they can find the financial means to bid for Victor Gyokeres, then I would expect them to be in that conversation.
This here says, my concern with Sesko is I hear he's very raw, needs a few seasons to be a worldie. In that time, still no major trophies, main players start to leave. And I think Arsenal, listen, I think Arsenal fans will feel that way. But with Sesko, I think he's getting to that age now where he's not a baby. There will be an expectation on him to deliver quite quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Just on that, Terry, really briefly, Sesko's played 200 professional games and he's basically scored 100 goals. He got 21 goals in all competitions this season. He got 18 last season. He was playing in Europe for Leipzig when he was at Salzburg. He got 18 goals in his final season as well. So you've had 3 consecutive seasons now where Benjamin Sesko scored 15 plus goals in all competitions. He's played at Europe at the highest level with Leipzig and he's 21 years of age. And therefore Arsenal will be looking at that signing if they choose to go in that direction over Gyokeres. And again, both are under consideration. But if they choose to go in that direction, it's because they think that Sesko is the real deal now. And so many people look at the age of Sesko or the fact that he hasn't yet played in the Premier League. But we have to remember that because so many young players are being given so many opportunities so early in modern football in their career, Sesko's age compared to a similar kind of profile 10 years ago is basically equivalent back in those days to, I would say, a 24 or a 25-year-old, because he's inexperienced in age, but he's experienced in terms of games played.
Very, very, very true. We have a couple of super chats here. First one from Abdul that says, Garcia to Barcelona news, Ben, is his decision pending? And Nick B says, are there any news on a new goalkeeper to United? Just to answer Nick, I'm not going to answer for Ben. Emi Martinez, Ben says, is one to watch. But Jean Garcia, Barca or United goalkeeper news?
Yeah, I think Barcelona like Garcia, that's for sure. There's Premier League interest. We've said it before earlier in the show. Aston Villa could be one to watch if Emi Martinez leaves. Manchester United have looked at Garcia, but I think the big difference is that Garcia wants guarantees he is definitively number one next season. And that makes it a little bit harder for Arsenal because of David Raya. It makes it a little bit harder for Manchester United because at the moment, Andre Onana's future is unclear. And I'm not so sure that United would gamble on a Garcia as an out-and-out number one. I think they would be more inclined to try for an established, proven Premier League goalkeeper like Emi Martinez. So keep an eye on the Martinez situation, because I am told Atletico Madrid and Manchester United, along with Saudi interest, are the main options at the moment for Martinez if he leaves Aston Villa. With Garcia and Barcelona, to answer that question, concrete interest there. And there are talks between Barcelona and the player side. So let's see how that develops and whether Garcia prefers to try the Premier League or go to Barcelona. I think Barcelona are quite confident that the player is keen on a move. So now we'll have to understand whether or not anybody triggers that release clause, which I believe off the top of my head is in excess of 25 million euros.
Makes total sense. Just last final bit before we go. Arsenal fans asking about this new deal for Gabriel Magalhaes, the centre back. That's likely to go through, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said before, there's an urgency for Arsenal to get this one done because they know that Al Nassr are prepared to place a very important and big bid for Gabriel if there is no contract extension agreed. And Arsenal are calm about the situation because they don't think Gabriel wants to go to Saudi. And I expect that renewal to happen fast. And I think the reason why it's been bumped up in the pecking order above even Saka and Saliba at this stage is because Arsenal know if they get to the 1st of June, Saudi are going to try for Gabriel and they just don't want any surprises. So I'm expecting Gabriel to stay. I actually think Saliba will stay despite interest from Real Madrid. With Gabriel Magalhaes and Leandro Trossard, there's been outreach. It's more advanced with Trossard than Gabriel Martinelli, but to both, they've been told there's an opportunity to extend their contracts, but they're all or nothing situations, which is quite interesting. And by that, I mean, Arsenal are simultaneously with Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard seeking to extend them, to settle them and protect their value. But if in that process they get offers for either, they will also entertain them. So it's kind of all or nothing at both extremes. And it wouldn't surprise me if in the next few weeks we get a bid for either Leandro Trossard or Gabriel Martinelli from Saudi Arabia. And then we wait and see how Arsenal react to that. But Saliba, Gabriel Magalhaes, and obviously Bukayo Saka, Arsenal don't want to entertain offers for. And my expectation is that Gabriel and Saka will extend and quite smoothly. And obviously there's work being done on Saliba to make sure that a European suitor doesn't come in for him.
Thank you. Listen, Ben, always a pleasure to sit and get the updates from yourself. I know you've got to shoot. Viewers, please thank Ben by hitting the like button. Make sure you're sharing this across your social media platforms. We're back later today with straight facts for you at 3:30. So this will redirect you there. So we'll see you all live at 3:30 on the Football Terrace. Until next time, everybody, take care. Goodbye. Look after yourselves. And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.